May 4th, 2007. Greensburg, Kansas. Population 1,400 people. By 9:45 that night, 95% of the entire town was gone. Not damaged, not flooded. Gone. Erased down to the foundation.
I'm on 183. We have at least EF2 damage at a homestead here to the east side of 183 highway.
As if someone had taken a mile-wide eraser and dragged it across the map of Kansas. Meteorologists would later call this tornado one of the most violent atmospheric events ever documented in modern history. A perfect EF5 with winds exceeding 205 miles per hour, wider than the town it was about to consume. But here's what most people don't know. The tornado wasn't the only thing that made this night catastrophic. There was a warning system in place. People heard the sirens. Some had nearly 20 minutes of advance notice. And it still killed 11 people and left 1,400 homeless in under 60 seconds of direct impact. What happened inside Greensburg that night? The decisions made, the moments that separated survival from death, the things that were found afterward, is a story most people have never fully heard. And by the end of this video, you won't just understand what happened. You'll understand why this tornado changed the way the entire country thinks about storm shelters, warning systems, and what it actually means to rebuild. To understand what hit Greensburg, you have to understand what kind of day May 4th, 2007 was across the Southern Plains. The Storm Prediction Center in Norman, Oklahoma, had issued a high-risk outlook, the rarest and most severe warning in their system, covering a massive swath of Kansas, Oklahoma, and Nebraska. High risk is not issued casually. It means atmospheric conditions are so favorable for violent tornadoes that meteorologists are essentially telling the public, today is dangerous in a way most days are not. The setup was almost textbook. A deep upper-level trough was digging into the Rockies, forcing powerful jet stream winds over the region at 150 miles per hour. Below it, warm, moist air from the Gulf of Mexico was surging north across the plains. Rich, humid air loaded with instability. And cutting through the middle was a sharp, dry line, the invisible atmospheric boundary, where dry desert air collides with that Gulf moisture. When a storm erupts along that boundary on a day like this, it doesn't just produce a tornado. It produces something that meteorologists genuinely fear. At 6:22 p.m., the first tornado of the outbreak touched down in southwest Kansas. It was weak, brief, almost unremarkable for a high-risk day.
The sirens can only mean one thing. A tornado has been spotted. Lindy jumps up from the table.
And that's when I started, moving around. I put my shoes on. I just get downstairs and I just kind of stayed down there, turned on the TV down there.
But the atmosphere wasn't done loading. By 8 p.m., a discrete supercell thunderstorm, meaning a single organized rotating storm structure, had developed southwest of Greensburg. Storm chasers in the area immediately recognized what they were looking at. The rotation on radar was tight and accelerating. The wall cloud lowering beneath the storm was massive, visibly churning, illuminated by constant lightning. One chaser later described it as looking like the bottom of the storm was being pulled toward the ground. At 9:04 p.m., the National Weather Service in Dodge City issued a tornado warning for Kiowa County. The warning was specific. It named Greensburg directly. It estimated the tornado was capable of significant and life-threatening damage. The sirens in town began to wail. People had roughly 19 minutes. That sounds like enough. In most scenarios, 19 minutes is enough to reach shelter, to get underground, to survive. But Greensburg was a town built largely in another era. Older housing stock, homes with crawl spaces instead of basements, mobile homes on the edge of town. And the tornado that was coming wasn't built like most tornadoes. At 9:10 p.m., the funnel made contact with the ground 10 miles southwest of Greensburg. Within minutes, storm chasers tracking it were reporting something extraordinary on their radar displays. The tornado's ground-level width was already approaching 3/4 of a mile. It was still intensifying, still growing. A tornado that wide moving at 45 miles per hour doesn't look like what most people picture. It doesn't look like a rope. It doesn't look like a narrow column. It looks like a wall. A moving, roaring wall of darkness, a mile wide and reaching from the ground to the base of the storm, filling the entire visible horizon. And it was heading directly for a town that took less than 10 minutes to drive through end to end. By 9:20 p.m., the entire town of Greensburg was inside the tornado's projected path. Not near it, inside it. There was no going around this. No route out, that would be fast enough. The time for leaving was over. At 9:28 p.m., the eastern edge of the tornado entered Greensburg. It didn't feel like wind first. Survivors described the pressure drop. Ears popping, the air going strange. A low mechanical roar building from the southwest, like a freight train multiplied by 100. Then the debris cloud arrived ahead of the actual funnel, and within seconds, it was simply dark. Not dim, black. A churning wall of lumber, insulation, metal roofing, and soil moving at over 200 miles per hour. The tornado was 1.7 miles wide when it hit downtown Greensburg. To put that in context, the entire town of Greensburg was approximately 1.2 miles wide. The tornado was bigger than the town it struck. Buildings that had stood for a century were gone in seconds. The brick facades of Main Street, the hardware store, the pharmacy, the local diner, peeled away and were carried downwind before their foundations had time to creak. The high school, the middle school, the hospital, all took catastrophic direct hits. The Kiowa County Memorial Hospital, the only medical facility for 30 miles in any direction, had most of its structure torn away. Staff and patients who had sheltered in interior hallways emerged to find the building largely open to the sky. One resident, Lonnie Haas, survived by lying flat in a bathtub, while his entire house was lifted from around him. He described being able to see the rotation of the tornado above him, lit by lightning, before debris buried him where he lay. The destruction was total. Then the roaring stopped. For a moment, survivors described something almost peaceful. The pressure normalized, the sound vanished, and then they emerged, one by one, into something unrecognizable. A front door, still upright, still in its frame, standing alone in an empty lot where a house used to be. The walls gone, the roof gone, the floor gone, everything gone. But the door still locked, still standing, as if waiting for someone who would never come back through it. Of Greensburg's 900 structures, approximately 961 buildings were damaged or destroyed. The National Weather Service survey team rated the damage at EF5.
When an EF5 tornado destroyed most of the town of Greensburg. KSN's Zach Martin spoke to the former mayor about the recovery efforts these communities are now facing. That story is new at 10.
The maximum intensity on the enhanced Fujita scale. Winds confirmed at 205 miles per hour or higher.
Leila, please tell us what
Hello?
happened.
Well, we were watching actually K channel, and I know you said, the tornado is coming straight towards Greensburg, so we stayed at home until the last minute, and then the power went out. So then I was inside the closet, and then my husband came in, and we just stayed there until it was all over.
It was the first EF5 tornado recorded since the new scale had been introduced in February 2007, just 87 days earlier. 11 people lost their lives, 63 were injured, and every single one of the 1,400 residents of Greensburg was now homeless. Their town, every part of it, was gone. But the story of what happened next, and the question of what Greensburg chose to do with nothing left, that's what no one talks about enough.
No, hold on, please. I'm looking. It's gonna...
We are freaking in the tornado. This is literally what... Oh, God. This is terrible.
Thank you, Jesus, for protecting us in the name of Jesus.
The storm passed. What it left behind was silence and foundations, roads blocked, power out, communications down. The National Guard arrived the next morning to find a landscape that looked, in the words of one soldier, like a bomb went off. Not in one place, everywhere. The search and rescue operation ran for days. Teams worked through rubble piles that used to be homes, using dogs and listening equipment to locate survivors trapped beneath collapsed structures. In some areas, the debris was piled so thick that heavy equipment had to be used before rescue workers could get to ground level. Phyllis Jennings had lived in Greensburg her entire life. She was 70 years old. She survived the tornado in her basement. When she climbed out, she stood in the middle of what had been her street and could not identify a single landmark in any direction. The houses, the trees, the utility poles, everything that told her where she was simply not there anymore. She later said she stood there for several minutes, completely disoriented, before a National Guard soldier found her. Her house was gone. Her neighborhood was gone. The street itself, buried under so much debris, was unrecognizable. She never returned to live in Greensburg permanently. The scale of destruction generated a question that went national almost immediately. Why didn't more people die? 11 fatalities in a town of 1,400, struck by a 1.7-mile-wide EF5. By historical standards, the death toll should have been catastrophically higher. The answer, researchers found, was the 19-minute warning. The NWS lead forecaster on duty that night, meteorologist Brian Smith, had issued the warning with remarkable specificity and lead time. His decision to name Greensburg directly, to communicate clearly that this was a life-threatening event targeting that specific town, drove hundreds of people underground before the tornado arrived. Official analysis concluded the warning system likely saved between 50 and 100 lives. The system worked, but it hadn't been built to handle a tornado bigger than the town. The Kiowa County Memorial Hospital was condemned and had to be demolished. 11 of the 14 physicians who had practiced in Greensburg left after the tornado, unable to rebuild their practices in a town that no longer existed in any recognizable form. The economic damage reached $250 million in a county with an annual tax base of roughly $4 million. There were serious public discussions about whether to rebuild Greensburg at all, or whether to simply not. What Greensburg chose to do with nothing left is the part of this story that genuinely surprises people. The town voted to rebuild, but they made one decision that set them apart from every other disaster recovery in modern American history. They voted to rebuild entirely with green, sustainable energy. Every new public building in Greensburg was constructed to LEED Platinum certification standards, the highest energy efficiency rating in the country. The town installed a wind farm that now produces 130% of Greensburg's electricity needs, selling the surplus back to the grid. A town that a tornado destroyed was rebuilt by wind. That decision was made by fewer than 700 people choosing to stay. Investigators confirmed what the damage survey showed. The warning system had performed exceptionally. The forecast was accurate. The sirens were sounded with time to spare. But in a town where many homes had no true basement, where the oldest and most vulnerable residents lived in the oldest and least reinforced structures. The gap between having a warning and having a place to go proved fatal for 11 people. The tragedy of Greensburg was not that no one was warned. It was that knowing what was coming doesn't protect you if you have nowhere safe to go. New national conversations about public storm shelters, community-safe rooms, and shelter-in-place standards for mobile home parks accelerated directly following Greensburg. FEMA funding for community-safe rooms increased. Building codes in tornado-prone regions were revisited. One EF5 tornado in one town of 1,400 people changed the architecture of how America thinks about preparedness at the neighborhood level. Greensburg still exists. Smaller, quieter, rebuilt from scratch on the same coordinates where an EF5 erased everything in less than 60 seconds. The new buildings are different. The streetscape is different. Many of the faces are different, but the town is still there, which, given what struck it on May 4th, 2007, is something close to remarkable. The tornado didn't just destroy Greensburg. It forced a choice, and the people who stayed chose to build something better than what was taken from them. That's not optimism. That's just what happened. Something you might not know. Most people watching this video right now aren't subscribed to disaster archives. If you made it this far, through the warning, through the impact, through everything Greensburg lost and chose to rebuild, you're exactly who this channel is built for. Check whether you're subscribed. If you're not, it's one tap, and it's the only thing that tells the algorithm to keep showing you videos like this one. Drop a comment with the disaster you want covered next. I read every single one. Let's build this together. What happened in Greensburg was devastating. But there was another tornado that pushed the limits of what scientists thought was even possible. That tornado was Bridge Creek, a storm that reached 321 miles per hour. And what it did next is something most people still don't fully understand. If you want to see the most powerful tornado ever recorded, click the video on your